Joining us now, member of the Armed Services and House Intelligence Committee, Republican Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio. Thank you so much for being on this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with what the president just said. Would you agree with his assessment of the Mueller probe being, and those who were charged, mostly bloggers and people who had nothing to do with him?
Well, I think when you look at what's been progressing, we certainly haven't seen any convictions or indictments that actually relate to the crime of conspiracy or colluding, that were the ultimate, underpinnings of what birthed the Mueller investigation. But I think it's absolutely important, contrary to what the president said, that the report ultimately be public. Certainly in the Intelligence Committee I've supported as a majority of the committee has, making even the transcripts of all of the investigation of the House Intelligence Committee available to the public. This has been such an important review where I think everyone has to have the ability to look at the information, look what occurred, and be able to look at the conclusions that the Mueller investigation ultimately delivers.
Congressman, I want to ask you about something we just heard President Trump say there. He said he's been the toughest president on Russia maybe ever. Do you agree with that assessment?
The president always has that of saying he's the biggest, the greatest, the best.
Has the president been tough on Russia at all?
Yes, he certainly has. He's both increased sanctions. He certainly has held them accountable, certainly in looking at the violations of the INF Treaty.
He increased sanctions? Really? He increased sanctions? I believe there was a bipartisan majority of Congress that implemented those sanctions over his objection.
Well, actually, no. The president did participate in increasing sanctions on Russia, and he certainly has kept things in place that were by the previous administration. But also, more importantly, he's armed Ukraine, which the previous administration refused to do, which was important. Remember Poroshenko pleading at a joint session of Congress that he can't not defend his people by getting blankets from the Obama administration. He said he needs weapons. This administration provided them the needed weapons to be able to have that credibility in their defense against Russia. So certainly there are examples of this president absolutely holding them accountable.
Just on this last thing, on the withdrawal from the INF Treaty last week, is this something that Vladimir Putin's quite happy about, apparently? I'd like to just hear you talk about how the withdrawal from the INF Treaty fits into the framework of whether the president is tough on Russia.
Well, absolutely, because what we had before in the prior administration was that Russia was not complying with the INF Treaty. They were already out, and we were complying. You can't have a treaty where only one side is complying, and that's what we had in this instance. We were restraining ourselves where Russia was free to violate the treaty. And, we're talking about nuclear weapons here. There's no margin of error here. This is the worst of violations that you can have for destabilizing international security, and they were getting a pass from the Obama administration. Now you have the NAC at NATO unanimously identifying that Russia was violating the INF Treaty. The United States calling on Russia to come into compliance. So when they refuse to come in compliance, the United States then withdrawing. This has been Putin's plan since he left the presidency and put Medvedev in and became the prime minister to rebuild his military. He didn't just instantly begin violating the INF Treaty. This has been a long plan of his where his lack of compliance has resulted in the United States to take a stand and say, we're not going to be in a treaty that you're not in.
Congressman, just going back to the Mueller situation, and you made the point that nobody directly involved with the president has yet been indicted or even charged with any kind of crime. But nonetheless, when you look at the list of people who have been charged or who have pled guilty, the Flynns, the Manaforts, the Cohns, and so on, you do get a picture of a president who has surrounded himself, both in his private life and now in his public life, with people who are going to jail for very serious crimes. How should we think about a president who picks people of that caliber to be among his most senior advisors?
Right. Well, just to correct you, I did not say that they were not indicted or charged with crimes. What I said is that you haven't seen anybody who has been indicted or has been charged with colluding or conspiring with Russia with respect to the outcome of this past election, which again was the foundation and the basis of the assignment to Mueller campaign. Now, that's not to excuse at all any of the behavior that has been found or the charges that have been brought forward, and certainly I think it certainly gives a questionable environment when you think of the judgment of those who were participating.
Well, what about the questionable judgment of the president for having picked them? And where does that, how does that leave you thinking about the president as someone who should be the leader of the free world?
Well, you know, he was chosen to be leader of the free world. And I think, you know, as he moves forward in that role, I think it's absolutely important that when we look at this investigation, we characterize what's coming out of it and what its main purpose was. Its main purpose was to identify whether there had been collusion, you know, cooperation, collaboration with Russia, and there has not been yet, and we have to wait for the ultimate report, anyone who has been charged or indicted for that. And that is important as we look overall to the, you know, perhaps the conclusion of this investigation.
You know, I really appreciate your candor, Representative. It's tough as a Republican, and we're also, you know, trying to see what you'll exactly say here. But it is tough, isn't it? I mean, doesn't so far what has been revealed in the Mueller probe raise questions in your mind about the sanctity of our election process and the closeness of some of these people to the President of the United States, especially Mike Flynn?
Well, I think if you look at any of the people who were surrounding the president during his campaign, it doesn't take the Mueller investigation for us to have had some question or concern as to how that campaign was unfolding or the people who were surrounding it. It did obviously have a sense of chaos about it that from which people had concerns overall as to what it meant for the president's style and management. I think we certainly see that as we go through the tumultuousness that people see at the White House. It's not a theme that has changed. But that doesn't change the underlying basis of which the Mueller investigation has proceeded, and we have to wait, I think, to see what this final report is, and I absolutely believe it has to be public because this has been such, as you said, you know, right to the heart of the issue of the sanctity of democracy. This is an important investigation. This has to be public. It's why I supported all of the transcripts before the House investigation of the Intelligence Committee being made public. We're in the process of those being reviewed so the public themselves can read what these individuals have said and can make their own decisions, as we certainly have tried to provide some conclusions and analysis of what's been going on.
Fair. Congressman Mike Turner, thank you very much for being on this morning. We appreciate it.